have wanted to ask Adam this for a long time, and I was actually going to ask him this privately off air. But then I thought, Morning Joy is family, and we journey together, and we've been journeying together for a little over a year now. And I thought, I'm going to ask Adam when we do the Next Right Thing and see if he can share with us some of the details of this, because I was just curious. I actually was thinking about it when Adam shares with me each and every Friday that he goes into his exorcism work and the sessions and everything and the cases that he's working on every single Friday, pretty much. I sometimes I'll sit there and I'll go, I wonder what Adam's doing right now. Is he praying? Is he, fighting off the demons? Is he coaching the priest? What is he doing? And then I got to thinking, well, what happened? What has happened in the past if an exorcism has gone wrong, or somebody broke the rules, or something happened with the possessed individual that wasn't expected. And so I wanted just to ask Adam that, not to get into the kind of I hate to say it this way on a Friday morning, but the kind of the creepy details of it. But I really am curious if it's always so predictable, or can things go wrong? And has an exorcism gone wrong, Adam?
Well, I mean, you're touching on something that is kind of important, in the sense that most of the public has a very limited kind of mental picture of exorcism. People picture the movies, they picture the stories that they've heard, and those stories that they typically hear from a priest talking about this stuff are exciting moments, exciting exchanges between the priest and the demon. But exorcism is a ministry. It has a large pastoral component to it. Exorcism isn't just about a priest in a room yelling at a demon that's in a body. It's about that human being who's suffering and is possessed, and the church trying to support them and help them and pray for them till the time comes when they are freed of that. And that pastoral process of trying to help that person, that is done over weeks, months, and years in most cases. So, yes, things have gone wrong in the sense of people backsliding, of people falling into serious sin during the week in between the sessions, maybe falling back into drugs or alcohol and it causing a major relapse in the case, and basically stepping back 3 steps. And kind of you're dealing with demons you were dealing with last month, and they're back because the person backslid. Those kind of things pastorally can go wrong. In the broadest sense, Deb, things can go quote-unquote wrong in the sense that a person isn't always freed. You need to realize that, again, it's not about, if the priest is holy enough or if he prays long enough, the demon will be forced out. That's not a proper understanding. The proper understanding is Jesus decides when he casts it out, no matter how long and fervently and how holy, or pious the priest is who's praying. Doesn't matter. The date appointed for it to be cast out is the date it's going to be cast out. So we pray our hearts out for the person 100% all the time. You don't just, the priest doesn't just order the demon, well, what's the date you're going to be cast out, and then cancel all the sessions till that day and then pray. You're praying all the time. But a proper understanding is, again, that we are praying and we have to wait on God. The other thing is, we have to wait on the person's repenting, the person's forgiving, and the person trusting Jesus. Those are the 3 big pastoral things people need to work on. They've almost always fallen into serious sin, which led to the possession, black magic, playing around with divination, that type of stuff. So they need to stop all that. There's often wounds from their childhood they need to forgive.
Right.
And then they need to find a closeness with Jesus and a trusting in Jesus. Those are the 3 big things that we see that God wants developed in the person as they're being freed. And sometimes, Deb, people are not willing to do those steps, and therefore the case stalls and never resolves. And I know of some cases where the person was possessed for the rest of their life and they passed on and they died. So the cases end one of 3 ways. The person's free, it's a stalemate, or the person eventually dies. And so in that sense, you could say it, quote unquote, went wrong, but the person's still receiving grace the whole time from the prayers. Being possessed when you die doesn't guarantee damnation at all. The soul is just judged on its own regardless. So there's no like fear that you've lost the person to damnation. That's not how it works. They're judged just like every other soul is judged at the moment of death. So they can be in a state of grace and still be possessed. So we don't despair of that, but we would say, we would hope that that person would be freed. That's our fervent hope and prayer. And so you would say, well, it went wrong in the sense they weren't freed. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, it does. So I've got a couple more questions about this. So a person is, you went through all the psychological testing, and I'm sure, all the spiritual direction and things like that. And then it was determined by the diocese, I guess, because the person would be in that diocese, and it's determined that, yes, this is a possession case, right? So then it gets moved to that area. And so that's your area in your particular diocese where you live. Mm-hmm. So you're working with that individual, you said, days, months, years. So in the meantime, in between sessions, obviously that person is not being monitored by all of you, who are the coaching and the prayer group and the priest. This person's got to function. Is the person able to hold a job? Are they able to be a wife and a mother and a husband and a father? What do they do? They're just not sitting on the couch waiting for their next exorcism ministry session.
Right. And this is another area that I don't think many people understand. So some people are able to hold a job and function and keep their family life basically going. Some people are not. Some people are essentially disabled by this and end up going on disability for some of the physical side effects and damage that's done to them bodily through being possessed. So I've seen people that have ended up literally legally disabled. I have seen parents that had young children that they were able to more or less do their job as a parent, but they would go into possession states and the kids would be terrified of this. This would, happen on a regular basis at home. And it was a trauma for the children, of course, to have your parent have these voices coming out of them and coming at them and saying horrible things and threatening them, etc. So more or less, they can function, but it causes damage to everybody around that person in their life, basically.
Mm-hmm. Do they know that they are possessed?
Well, they can go for years not being sure what's wrong until, and this is almost always where it turns, until they go back to church for the first time in all these years or decades that they find for some reason they just haven't gone. Or they go to a prayer meeting that they haven't been to such a thing in decades, and people are praying for them, and suddenly there's a manifestation and everybody realizes there's a terrible problem. If the demons are winning, and for them, winning is you're in a state of mortal sin, you're staying away from God, you're not thinking about God, you're not praying, you're not going to the sacraments, their motivation is to lay low and not show themselves because they're winning. That's what they want, is damnation. Their goal isn't to terrify everybody. Their goal is to get people damned. So there are people that go for years having indications that there's a serious problem, wondering, suspecting that there's something spiritually wrong, but not being sure until there's prayer brought in or they go to the sacraments.
Right. I know you've said this before, but we have new listeners each and every time we do the Morning Joy production every single weekday. But how much of it is mental illness?
Well, possession is not mental illness. They're two different things. So
right, but how when people come forward to be evaluated, how would you say 90% have a brain health issue and they're not possessed, or can you give us an idea of that?
Yeah, I would say yes, 80 to 90% of the time it's misunderstanding. There's a lot of people that these days now think that if somebody just behaves in a way that they don't like, that they're possessed, and that's not even close to the criteria.
Yeah, somebody can get angry or have too much to drink and they act foolish, and then they go, "Oh my goodness, they're possessed."
Yeah, that's not how it works.
Right. Right.
So, of all the people that call in, you might have 1, 2 in my experience, at the most 3 new cases in an entire calendar year in a major city. Out of all the people that think they have spiritual problems.
And are you able to share this? Is it primarily men or women? Who gets possessed more?
Women by about 4 to 1.
Why is that?
Nobody knows for sure.
Do you have a guess?
The guess is that the incarnation of Jesus through Mary and her yes and her participation in that, and the fact that she was conceived without original sin and they could never touch her, and she was the instrument of the incarnation, means they have a particular terrible
hatred to women,
hatred and fear of Mary. And so they take that out on women that they can touch and affect. That's my theory on it, but nobody knows for sure.
Yeah, but that makes sense, though. That really does make sense. Also, women tend to be receivers just by the way they were created, right? So they receive. Mm-hmm. And so they could be more, don't you think, more susceptible, maybe?
It's possible. It's possible. I do think sometimes men just don't complain and actually try to live with it and deal with it.
Gotcha. Okay. Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. I really, honest to goodness, Adam, I had these thoughts about it a couple weeks ago, and I really wanted to ask you these questions, and you weren't even prepared for this segment. I didn't even say to you, Adam, these are the questions I'm going to ask or anything, and thank you so much. I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, and if there's anything you can't answer or you want to be very protective of what we are hearing in the morning or what you are sharing, that's totally fine. I'm not trying to be nosy, and I'm not trying to get some kind of adrenaline rush on a Friday. I'm really just curious because I think it's fascinating to me that these possessed individuals that you guys have put through the process of in talking to them, questioning them, examining them, making sure that it's indeed this spiritual what would you say? It's an intrusion into the body, right? Because they're possessed individuals. The demons aren't touching their soul, but they are they are inhabiting their being.
Yeah, so Thomas Aquinas would say that it's a domination of the lower faculties, which is the body and the emotions. The rational mind, the higher faculty, can never be touched, and the soul, of course, is God's, so they can never possess that. Right. But so, yeah, it's an effect they have or dominion over the body and the emotions. Body. Yeah. Okay.
So, does the person turn it on and turn it off when they're in session?
They don't control when these things manifest. These things manifest, well, number one, if they want to, and Jesus allows it to scare people, do some harm to the possessed person, do some harm to the family, like I mentioned about the parents scaring the kids in the middle of the night. Right. They will manifest when they are driven to manifest by prayer, holy water, sacramentals being used, that kind of stuff. So you get 2 or 3 priests praying around the person, and they're going to manifest within minutes because the spiritual agitation of the prayer to the demon is a pain and a suffering that forces it to show itself.
So it's an affliction then.
Well,
how would you deem it? I mean, what do you call it?
Well, a possession is an extraordinary influence over the person.
Okay, an influence. Okay.
Another way to think of it is an extraordinary relationship with the demon. So a normal relationship is temptation. We know that God allows them to tempt us, cradle to grave, all through our life. They're allowed to tempt us. The extraordinary deeper relationship is when they're allowed to actually touch us and interact with our bodies. And that's not normal. It's very rare. And it's only when there's some consent for that level of relationship.
But it's causing them suffering and pain. It never feels good to them.
Well, demons are con artists. In the beginning, they don't say, I'm offering you suffering and pain. In the beginning, they say, I'm your guardian angel, or I'm your totem animal, or I'm your dead grandmother. I'm here to guide you. I'm your spirit guide. I'm here to teach you things. They have a con in the beginning, and they pretend to be your friend. And then slowly over time, they demand slightly more and slightly more and slightly more control of the person and what they do and don't do in their life. Mm-hmm. And then once their hold is strong enough, they stop pretending to be that good figure. And now they simply say, you're going to do what I say when I say it. And they start punishing when the person doesn't obey. And that's when it turns ugly. So they're not stupid. They're not going to be ugly in the beginning.
Wow. When you started this work, and I just want to get the terms correct. I mean, we call it exorcism. We call it ministry. We call them the solemn rite of exorcism. What do you like to call it? What you do every Friday?
Well, technically, it's a solemn exorcism, but we just say exorcism or sessions.
Sessions, okay.
Yeah.
And they do this. They do the solemn exorcism. Okay, and that's a prayer.
Yeah, it's a liturgical prayer in the sense that it involves readings from the Gospels. Mm-hmm. It involves readings from the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Gospels, and it involves large passages of directly addressing the demon where the priest commands it in the name of Jesus to leave the person in various ways.
Okay, and it's very strict rules, very strict rules on how the exorcist is supposed to conduct themselves.
Yep, and you can only ask very limited things. You can only say very limited things directly to the demon. You're not supposed to enter into conversation or entertain their theology or their description of something. You're not allowed to let them prattle on and talk and take over the circumstance.
Okay, and every bishop is considered an exorcist, correct?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, right.
And they delegate that to one of their or multiple priests within their diocese. Okay,
gotcha. So I think this is interesting because we have new listeners and the reason why this came up actually a couple weeks ago is somebody actually I was out and about running errands and it started I started talking about the radio show and I shared about you, Adam, and they said, well, what is a religious demonologist? Like, what is that? Mm-hmm. And so I had to start to go into an explanation and then it got into, possession and everything. And it really was interesting because the person was very, wanting to learn more. But I find that sometimes the terms, the understanding, how the environment is set up to work this ministry out is odd for all of us who we don't understand it because it's kept quiet. It's kept very, separate from what we know to be as what we know it, what's done in public for us as the faithful. So I think this is helpful. And do you find that you get asked a lot of questions about it, or do people just accept that you do this and that's it?
Strangely, they just accept that I do this. Back when I was finishing up graduate school in psychology, again, I have a master's in adult clinical psych. I was getting involved in this work, and I had finished that and finished comps and proposed the dissertation. And that's when I was getting involved in this work. And I always waited for that shoe to drop, for somebody to say, what's this crazy stuff you've gotten involved in? That's all, strange stuff and it can't be real. And actually, Deb, it's been the opposite. I've had more people call from that world saying, wow, can we have a conversation sometime? I have a lot of questions. Or that's fascinating. What have you seen? So now people just accept it.
Wow.
And they have curiosities, but it seems to have become a normal part of my life, even in the view of other people.
Well, we're so grateful to you, Adam, that you're teaching us each and every time you come on air with all of us on Morning Joy in the Spirit World. And you are so, you're such a trooper to answer all these questions. I appreciate it very much. I hope the Morning Joy listeners got something out of it. Share in the chats if you did. If you want more questions, if you want to ask Adam Blai about the work that he does, send it into the Spirit World. It's tsw@grnonline.com. You can send us emails.
Thank you for listening to The Next Right Thing with angel specialist Debbie Georgianni and religious demonologist Adam Blai. Debbie and Adam are daily contributors to the live radio program Morning Joy, hosted by Keith Downey every weekday on the Guadalupe Radio Network. For more authentic Catholic content, go to grnonline.com/joy.